And with that, let's bring in Arthi Pohl right now. And interesting, Arthi, because you, like so many other people around the Commonwealth, were watching the Queen's message at home. What stood out for you?
You know, it was interesting specifically to also hear her tone. It was an incredibly optimistic tone that we heard from the Queen in this very rare but brief message that we got from her. Now, let's also talk a little bit about her message itself and what it is that she did say. She said, for example, looking at this as an incredibly challenging time for so many grieving right now. Some are facing enormous financial challenges. Meanwhile, there are others who are facing hardships in terms of the drastic life changes that they're facing right now. She also thanked the healthcare workers, and she thanked those who are, in fact, staying home. We have heard from our correspondents in London that there are some folks who are flouting the rules, particularly as the weather is becoming more spring-like. That said, when we're talking about the optimism she also expressed, let's quickly take a listen to how she really ended this address.
While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavor, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us. We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Again, so that message really of coming together. Part of what she also said prior to that was that she was calling for unity, saying if we are united and resolute in tackling this crisis, we will overcome it. That's part of what you also heard there in the clip. And also, talking about the self-isolation, we know that she has, in fact, been in self-isolation in Windsor Castle since around mid-March. We know, of course, also that her son, Prince Charles, did recover from COVID-19. So this is an emergency that, of course, affects the world, affects the UK, and affects the Queen's own family, Michael.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Rosie said it a number of times, but this was very unprecedented. As we said right off top, the Queen has only really given an address like this a handful of times during her reign. So help put that into perspective for people who are watching.
You know, we were listening to a lot of royal commentators as well, and our former foreign correspondent in the UK, just talking about how this was sort of bringing forth one of those voices that comes forward only at a time of great need and great crisis. So yes, it was just a handful of times. In some cases, people talking about how it adds gravitas to the message that we know that the government in the UK has really been trying to put forward in order for people to stay at home despite how difficult these orders are to follow for mental health, and also just the drastic change to day-to-day life, but in order to make a dent in the number of cases that people are seeing in the United Kingdom. So such addresses like this one in her 68-year reign, as you mentioned, it's just a handful of times, talking about the Persian Gulf War, also when the death of Princess Diana occurred in the late 90s, also her mother's death, and that was in the early 2000s. And so these are times where the world was either grieving or at a great moment of crisis. It's rare to see that happen from the Queen, and certainly it's something that, as we've heard from our correspondents in London, they expect that many in the UK, and we suspect many around the world, were watching and listening to closely, Michael.
Okay, Arthi, thank you. And by the way, nice seeing you.